now that you have said things, I have to honor it. Okay, so that is teaching. It's interesting how this boy is teaching his father so many things. Boy is first teaching the father that your danam, your giving, has to be sattvic. The boy is also telling his father that whatever you say, you have to be careful about what you say, and you don't just say things which you don't mean. Okay? And he says, I'm going to go there. Okay? Because first of all, you are not giving the right things. Secondly, if you say things and you don't mean it, that is what another problem. So now I have to honor what you say, and I'm going to go and see Lord Yama. Now, imagine if it happened to a small boy. What would be the psychology, according to a modern psychology analysis, what this child would be?
Maybe feeling unwanted or neglected by the father.
Exactly.
Unwanted.
Right? According to modern psychology, if you look at this, this kind of a thing happens to you, a child would feel unwanted, would feel, that my father doesn't love me. And the child would suffer from many different things that the impression of this event would stay with him. Now Nachiketa was not the brooding type. He felt that if I am given the opportunity to go and see Lord Yama, I need to make use of it. It can't be a wasted opportunity, right? But if he goes to see Lord Yama, you go and see one big king, and you go to the palace of that big king. What is the guarantee that you'll be able to see the king? You go there, but what is the guarantee that you will be able to actually see the king? Not much, right? Some little boy goes to the big palace of Lord Yama. He's not going to get an audience with Lord Yama. If he says, okay, I want to go and see Lord Yama, do you think that he's just given this thing to access? You try to see one CEO of a company. It's difficult. You don't get appointments, you have to wait for months. Now here it is not just one CEO of a local company, it's Lord Yama. Right? So therefore, now this boy has to devise a strategy that he will get to see Lord Yama. Having gone there, he doesn't want to waste the opportunity. Right? So what does he do? He asks people around that I want to see Lord Yama, and they said, no, he's not around. He's gone on a mission. What is the mission that Lord Yama goes? So many people every second, somebody is going away. So he doesn't go for everyone, but for some important ones he has to go himself.
So there's no tone of foreboding because it's the Lord of Death.
Sorry?
There's no tone of fear.
No.
Because
there is not an ounce of fear.
So it's more of an anticipation of meeting and learning.
Exactly. That's a very good analysis. It's more like an anticipation for learning, right? And there is no fear. There's no fear. It's like another place that I'm going to go to, and I'm going to, first of all, I want to now, having gone there, I now need to strategize and make sure that I get to see the person there, Lord of Death. And it also then, as Deepa very rightly says, relationship with death. Very important, because there is one thing of which you cannot really get rid of your fear, and that is what? Mortality. Mortality of yourself and what? Of all your loved ones. I remember when I was young, it was amazing because I loved my father, and when I first learnt about this whole process of death, I was like, oh my God, what if my father goes away? He was completely fine, he was completely healthy, but it's just that, I loved him so much, and that possibility of that, sometimes I used to be like so afraid, and unless you learn about life differently, that fear never goes. Never goes. Because you love people, and idea of losing the loved ones, nobody can be comfortable with. Okay, so that means you need to have a different kind of relationship with death. How does that happen? How does that happen? That happens when you want to inquire into the very question, am I mortal or not? This is what the Upanishads make you do. Am I this mortal being that I think myself to be? It's an inquiry about my true nature. Like we saw, the very word of Upanishad. And until that inquiry takes place and you ascertain the right meaning of what is the nature of I, fear of mortality cannot leave you. Nobody can be totally comfortable with mortality. Okay, so now So now he needs to have an audience with him. So he says, okay, now if this is where I have to go, I have to make opportunity, I have to take this opportunity to solve this whole mystery of death. Right? So he asks, and Lord Yama is not around, now he wants to be noticed. So what does he do? He stays there, right? Not eating anything, not drinking anything. So then he's noticed. Because imagine if he had gone and then if he was offered some things and he started eating, what nobody would even take, nobody would notice him because he's a little boy of 11 years old. So he stops eating and he stops drinking, then he gets noticed. He gets noticed, and therefore here it is explaining, this verse, it is explaining how long does he not eat and drink. It is for, now Lord Yama comes back. Okay, now this is the next verse when Lord Yama comes back and Lord Yama is talking to Nachiketa. So I'll tell you the story a little bit more, then this verse will come. Okay, now he stays 3 nights, not eating or drinking anything. When Lord Yama comes back to the palace, what is the first news he gets? There's a boy waiting. There's a little boy waiting for you, and he's not eating anything and he's not drinking anything. Okay? What is Lord Yama's attitude towards this? That? What do you think?
Let me go find out what's.
Exactly. Right? He could have chosen and he could have said, okay, I don't care. Some boy, who cares? But Lord Yama is also highly evolved. So he wants to, like as Rashmi says, he wanted to know who is this boy? Why has he come here? And what he wants, why is he not eating or drinking anything? So he approaches the boy and he starts telling him. What he tells him is, Tisraha ratrihi yavat asi gruhe me anashnan brahman atithi anasasya namastestu brahman swasti me astu tasmat prati trin varan vrunishva. He tells him, he says that, oh my God, 3 nights you have spent in my home, not eating anything. How? Anashnan. Anashnan means not eating anything. Okay? And who are you? Looking at him, he says, you are a Brahmin. What is a Brahmin? It does not mean the caste Brahmin. Please understand. What does a Brahmin mean? Somebody who is a sattvic person. Sattvic person is what? Who is a sattvic person?
He lives by the truth.
Exactly. You want to follow dharma. You follow certain principles in your life. Right? Think beyond just how to accumulate more and more for myself. Beyond that. Because almost everybody's preoccupation is what? How can I accumulate? And not only for myself, but for so many posterity, so many future generations. And I'm so busy engaging in the world to manipulate the world in a way that I can get maximum out of it. Okay? A Brahmana is the one who has a slightly different way of interacting with the world. Yes, I may be interested in getting those things, but I also need to think about the behavior that I have and the actions I perform, and in that pursuit of accumulating things for me, am I hurting others or not? You can accumulate things without hurting others. It's not like everybody who accumulates things necessarily is doing through wrong means. So this person, Brahmana, is the one who begins to think, yes, I'm doing it, but am I doing the right way? Are my words hurting others? What is my behavior? What is my conduct? Okay, this is the person who is a real Brahmana, a sattvic person, a thinking person. So this is I love this thing of, this kids and the name of the class, thinking class. Thinking means you don't just do things mechanically. You think about things, implications of your actions on others, implications of your actions on yourself. This makes you Brahmana, reflective. Okay. Now, this Brahmana, how did he know that who is this? He didn't know. How does this Yama know he's a Brahmana? His face tells. When you live a life of what? Not hurting anybody. When you live a life of being careful, what? There is this whole idea in Upanishad which says Brahma Varchasam. Brahma Varchasam means there is some what? Your face is shining. The face is not shining out of Chanel makeup. The face is shining because there is clarity. Your eyes. The expression on your face. Okay? If you have chosen to live a life which is a thinking life, there is a certain amount of vibrancy on your face. And this little boy certainly had that. Okay? We think so much about, and this is what it is very interesting, because everybody wants to look beautiful and young, and we always think about what? Buying the latest makeup to what? Get the wrinkles not appear, dye our hair, everything that we can do, buy the most expensive creams. I mean, it's just incredible how many creams and what all they promise. It's just incredible. Right? The best beauty is when you what? Change your character, and that shows in your face, in your whole being. Okay, so therefore Lord Yama knew this boy is not ordinary, and he calls him Brahmana. He is shining without fear, the relationship. Okay. So therefore he says, now you have come to my home, and what has happened? You have not eaten anything. And Lord Yama says, you are an Atithi. Atithi means guest. Okay, in Sanskrit, this word atithi, tithi means date, and atithi means the one who has come without giving you any date. That means what? Person has,
Comes unannounced.
Exactly. The person who comes unannounced. Because this person who had come unannounced, he did not ask for an appointment, his time had not yet come, he came on his own. So he says, you have come to my home, and what is the attitude, what should I do when a Brahmana comes to my home as a guest? What should I do? The first thing that you do to Atithi, a guest, is what? You welcome the guest. Right? You take care of the guest. You offer water, you offer whatever, food. Now imagine, he says, nothing, not because he was not given, but you have refused. So now he says, if Brahmana comes to my home and he's not given anything, what will happen to me? He says, what will be the consequence for me? He says, it is a big papa for me. So what is the attitude of Lord Yama? Lord Yama is humble, right? It's not like because he did not give. Look at his attitude towards this little boy. He's not shooing him away. He's not just kind of, dismissing him. He's not impolite towards him. He doesn't even know who he is. And he has this huge position. And how does he talk to this person? And this is where actually you see that the people who stand out, even you have any person who has high position. Okay, what is the code of conduct? Well, how things work generally? When you have an appointment with that person who's supposed to be important, how does that person subtly show the importance of that person? Make you wait. This is a very subtle way of showing what? That I'm important. Okay, so that is, almost everybody does it. Now if there is one person who doesn't do it, that person what? And he still has that position, he or she. What happens? That person stands out. Because he's not falling into these normal norms of behavior. Thought about life, thought about things, behaves differently. Lord Yama is the same. Lord Yama tells the little child that if you have come to my place and if I have not looked after you, then what? I will accrue, I will have consequences. I'll have to pay for it because I did not take care of you. That is his humbleness. He's not asserting his authority. Hey, why didn't you eat? He didn't say that. Look at the characters in Upanishad. Look at how they talk to each other, how they behave with each other. Brilliant characters, brilliant depictions. Okay. Now he says, now I would have to bear consequences. So here he says, Namaste tu Brahman. I salute you. Lord Yama is telling to 11-year-old boy Nachiketa, I salute you. And now for all to amend, to mend all these things that happen to you, I will what? Trin Varan Vrunishwa. May you choose 3 boons. You can ask for whatever you want from me and I will give it to you. Now imagine you are asked, You choose whatever you want and you will be given. You think everybody will ask for the same thing? No. Everybody will ask for different things, and what will they ask?
According to their vasanas.
According to, let's not use, because nobody knows what is vasana and all. Well, let's talk normal. According to your desires, right? I mean, according to what you value. In fact, let's use the word according to what you value. You ask for things that you value. Right? Now, what you value shows the kind of person you are. It reflects who you are, because what is important to you. Okay, now this boy had to choose 3 things. So now he says, okay, now this is a later verse, so I will tell you what are the first 2 things, and this is his 3rd thing. Okay, so the 3rd thing comes later, I will tell you. The first thing he asks for is a boon. What do you think he should ask for? Before I tell you what he asked for, what do you think, or what could be his 3 boons? If you were him, what would you ask?
Forgive my father.
My God, Rashmi, you've read this? Yeah, she knows it. Oh my God, no, then. Okay. His first boon is, he says, look at his wording. He says, when right now my father, he's suffering. Because he's feeling guilty about what? His action, what? Is responsible for my going and coming and seeing you, so he is really devastated. So he says right now he should completely calm down. He's thinking about his father. Okay? He should completely calm down, and this is his first boon. And when I go back to see him, after meeting you, I'll go back to see him. He should not be angry with me. He should be very happy to see me and show me all his love. This is his first boon. What did he ask for? In one boon, what are the different things that he asked for?
He asked for his own life first, because to go back.
Exactly. Right? Immediately he wants his father to not suffer from this sense of guilt and this remorse that he would have, that his son has gone away, what did he do, and all of that he wanted the father to be free of. But as Rashmi says, he ensures what? That he goes back. Clever boy. He says, when I go back, what does it that when I go back means? He wants to make sure that he goes back. Okay. When I go back, then what is, imagine he sees and he's angry. And he says, now whatever, you are so irresponsible. What kind of relationship he would have with his father if father is angry with him? So he says he should he should welcome me with very open arms, and he should be very happy to see me. So these are the things that he asks in his first boon. What was his first boon meant for? Was it for himself? No. For whom was it? For his father. Well-being of his father, because even though the father asked him to go there, he's not holding any resentment. He's still thinking about well-being of his father. He's not indifferent to what happens to his father. Okay. This is what we call a psyche, in spite of difficulties, is not damaged. Some basic goodness remains. Otherwise, what happens is, a good human being, because of certain resentment, what happens? All these natural flow of emotions is aborted. natural flow of kindness, natural flow of consideration, because now you feel hurt by the behavior of somebody. Okay, so now look at this boy, look at his maturity. He's not nursing any hurt. He's just seeing that thing and he's still thinking about the well-being of his father, whom he loves very much. Okay, now the second boon. What was the second boon? What does he ask for? He says to Lord Yama, I see people around me, all kinds of people. He's 11-year-old boy and he's from a wealthy family. Okay? He says, I see all around me and there is so much suffering. Okay? People are unhappy for different reasons. And he says, you give me one ritual which will help people in whatever they want to get. So you teach me that ritual, using which it becomes what wealth of knowledge that humanity has. For example, okay, any knowledge, Newtonian physics. Today, when you go to a physics class, you learn certain principles of Newtonian physics. This is what? Contribution of Newton, which is what? Carried on for generations. Any piece of art, you go to France, you go to Spain and you look at the museums, you look at art. What century? And it still is human heritage. Right? So there are people who have they've created what legacy. For so many, they've left something in whichever field they chose to have, right? They have created, they have made that contribution. Nachiketa also wanted to make a contribution for what? Humanity forever. And he didn't want a specific ritual. He said, okay, now those who want wealth, they should have wealth. He said, whoever wants whatever, that ritual should help them in getting whatever they are looking for. So that means at the age of 11, his second boon, this noise is really too much, really. But for recording it's So therefore, the second boon was for humanity. And humanity of who? Very large definition. Very large definition of, I want to benefit human beings. Okay, and as much, but in so many different ways as possible. This is what we call a very intelligent human being, evolved human being. Generally, I do Bhagavad Gita at some other class, and I made them see today that in the first verse of Bhagavad Gita, where Dhritarashtra is saying to Sanjaya that what is happening in the battlefield between my people and Pandavas. Where was his mind confined to? To his sons. That was his mind defined as. Okay? Now when Arjuna looks at the same battlefield, where is his mind? Everywhere. It's not he's selfless. Please don't think. His mind remains, but his mind is extended so far. He sees on the other side what? His own people, mine, my people. For Dhritarashtra, mine was only his son, Pandavas were not mine. For Arjuna, Kauravas were mine. They are my relatives. They are my teachers. They are my what? My great grandfather. Then his mind remained only there? No. He went on and he said, not only my people I have to kill if I fight the battle, all the soldiers that are here present in this battlefield, I have to eliminate them all if I were to win the war. So that means what? His mind included what? All the soldiers. Because they are my people, my part of my community. And if I'm going to harm them, what kind of an act is that?
But even what about their wives?
Yes, excellent. Then he goes on further. Excellent. I'm so happy you know that. Okay. The third reason he gives is that imagine after the war, what kind of society it would be. All these women, because imagine a society where all the men are eliminated. And all these women with the children are just living there. What kind of society it would be? So he also thought about what? Way after the war, what will happen to those women and the children who find themselves without men, because they are all eliminated in the war. So his mind included what? The women, not only the soldiers, but the women and the children. What? Not only now, but he said there will be an effect for generations. Okay, so this is where you see where is your mind. Okay, this Dhritarashtra's mind was only his sons. Arjuna's mind was vast.
So for Arjuna and Nachiketa, I think they truly embodied the Vasudha
Kutumbam, exactly. Right? So in fact, when you look at the characters of Bhagavad Gita and Upanishad, it gives you an indication of this knowledge into reality is what? Available to what kind of person? Who is eligible for this inquiry? Who is naturally attracted to this inquiry? You need to have a certain evolution. Exactly. Both of them had this, as Sangeeta very rightly says, Vasudeva Kutumbam. Vasudeva Kutumbam means who is your family. Okay, and you go on expanding the definition of who is your family. This is a disposition of a person. Okay, so therefore, this is what we call his second boon for the whole humanity. What is his third boon? The third boon, what do you think it is? First, it was father. Second, the whole humanity. And the third, what? For yourself. Don't forget yourself. Helping the world, you can help the most if you help yourself. In one of my classes, one lady comes and once she told me something very beautiful. She told me a story. And she said that there was this puzzle, and it was a very complex puzzle, and a child was given this puzzle to solve it. And people thought that the child will never be able to solve this puzzle because it's too complex. Okay. After 15 minutes, the child solved the whole puzzle and he came. So everybody was quite astonished. How did this child figure it all out? And then they asked the child. They said, how did you figure it out? The child said, simple. He says, behind this complex puzzle, there is a human face. All I had to do was turn it around and what? Fix the human face. And if I fix the human face, and when I turn it around, what happened? The puzzle was in its place. What does it mean? Okay? You find yourself in a very complex world. And it's so difficult to solve what? The puzzle of what is this complex world all about. And you continue to look here, you continue to look there, you continue to, engage in the world in so many different ways, but it always remains a puzzle because it's too complex to solve it. But where is the key? You. The key is you. If you help yourself to right attitudes, right understanding, then the whole world, which seems so complex, is what? It is solved. This is what we call wisdom. We constantly look for solutions where? Somewhere here, somewhere there, and there is no end. Okay? When that human face, when we begin to question our attitudes, our values, when we question our understanding of the reality, and if we help ourselves to a bigger perspective and a true picture of what is, the puzzle of this universe is solved. Our culture has this beautiful, there are all these saints that we have which they express this idea. There is a beautiful poem of Mirabai. Okay, I don't know if some of you know Hindi a little bit. There is a nice poem. She says, Bhava Sagar sab sukh gaya hai, jarura nahi mujhe taranan ki. You feel that this sagar, which is the ocean of samsara. Ocean of samsara is huge, unfathomable. Okay? But when I inquire into the nature of this samsara, the whole samsara is sukh gaya hai. Disappeared. If it has disappeared, I don't have to cross it. She has solved the puzzle by asking right questions and getting right answers. This is, I don't see samsara to cross anymore. First I thought that there is this very frightening samsara which I had to cross. I had no idea, because that samsara, that ocean had so many things. It had shark, it had whales, it had all kinds of huge waves, and I didn't know how to deal with all of that. It was just frightening me. But when I inquired into it, the whole thing disappeared. Okay? And I find I don't even have to cross anything. There is same idea explained by Narsi Mehta. You know Narsi, that Gandhiji's favorite bhajan, Vaishnava Janato, it was written by Narsi Mehta. And he expresses the very similar idea. He says, Jagine jo to jagat dise nahi. If I come out from my what? Slumber. The darkness of ignorance, and if I look at what is the jagat, jagat is the universe, I don't see it. I see only myself. Okay, so that means the third boon has to be, any wise person has to invest in what? That is intelligent living. Right? Your perspectives, your understanding of realities. Okay? No matter how much somebody tells you, be kind, be compassionate, be giving, don't be jealous, If you keep your perspective of life and your understanding of life as it is, do you think you can switch? It's impossible, no matter how much advice anybody gives. You only can shift to a next level when you shift your perspective. That's why the whole teaching of Vedanta is not an advice, it is shifting your perspective. In light of that new perspective, everything will automatically drop. But you need to invest time and effort in making that shift. And therefore, the third boon is for himself. And what does he ask? He says, Yeyam prete vichikitsa manushye asti iti eke na ayam asti iti cha eke. Etam vidyam anushishtaha tvaya aham varanam eshaha varaha tritiyaha. So the tritiya varaha, the third boon among all the boons is what? That I want anushishtaha tvayaham. I want to be taught by you, okay, that vidya, that knowledge, which will enable me to ascertain one thing about which many people have doubt. What is the doubt? He says, Yeyam prete vichikitsa. Vichikitsa means doubt. Manushya, among all human beings. Asti iti eke na ayam asti iti cha eke. What happens to a person after the person leaves? Nobody knows. Some people say that what? You survive death. Some people say what? Nothing survives. And that doubt, what is the resolution of that doubt? You believe nothing, everything is just gone. And I believe, let's say, that it survives. We can what? Argue till cows go home and it is inconclusive. Do you think we come to any conclusion? It's impossible. Why is it impossible? Because nobody knows. Neither I can prove to you that there is life after, nor you can prove to me what? That there is no life after. We have zero. Any inference can be based on what? Any intelligent inference can be based on what? Your perception. Right? For example, I make an inference that there is a smoke. I see smoke and I say there is fire. How did I make that inference? I have seen what? I have seen it before, what? The invariable concomitance. This is what we call invariable concomitance. Every time there is fire, there is smoke. So next time, if I don't see the fire and I see only the smoke, what do I infer? There is fire. Right? So that means any intelligent inference requires what? Perception. And I have to make sure that there are two things which are always invariable. Two things always go together. Sometimes we make wrong inferences. How do we make wrong inferences?
Wrong perception.
Is it wrong perception or is it wrong conclusion?
Wrong conclusion.
Wrong conclusion. Excellent.
If it has rained, it is wet. If it is wet, it need not have rained.
Excellent. Excellent. Right? So that means that when it rains, it's always wet. You can't have rain and you can't have wet. So therefore, the minute you see something wet, you make an inference that it must have rained. But is it true? There is what we call not invariable concomitance. One is true, but the other is not true. This is why many times our inference goes wrong. Okay, so that means that this is not, the wetness cannot come only from one source, which is the rain. That is a problem, and I have assumed that it comes only from one source. This is where I go wrong with my logic. It is not totally ungrounded, but it is not tight enough. Right? Now, about life after, do you have any you have any data? You have zero data. Therefore, there is no basis for any inference. Please understand that. Because every inference is based on perception. And if I don't have any data for perception, I can't make any inference which I can say it's valid. Even though there is data, I can make wrong inference. Here I have no data in the first place. So therefore, he says, who better? Because I can't ask any other human being. Nachiketa is very smart. I said, I can't ask any other human being because nobody knows, nobody can prove anything. But I can ask you, what happens? I want to know. All these human beings, they are confused about what happens. Do we survive or do we not survive? Okay. Now, Adi Shankaracharya, who writes comment, this is his literal question. His literal question is that there is this doubt among human beings as to what happens to oneself after the death. Some people say that I survive the death, some people say I don't survive the death, and who better than you can answer this question? Why do you think he's asking Lord Yama? He is the Lord of Death. He has the key. Right? It's a right question to the right person. He asks his question, and then Adi Shankaracharya is so smart, in his commentary, he asks this question. He says, what kind of question is this? He says, already he has left the earth or not? He is left because he has gone to see whom? Lord Yama, not on earth, somewhere else. And has he survived or not? Only because he has survived, he is asking this question. This is Adi Shankaracharya. I will make you think things that you'll never think of. So he says, what kind of question is this? He is already finding himself that he has survived the so-called death of the earth, and he has gone there to see Lord Yama. So why is he asking? He knows that you survive. According to the story, you survive. So he said, that cannot be the question. The real question is something different. The real question is, what is the nature of I? What is the real nature of I? Am I this mortal which is subject to birth and death, or is there a reality about me which is much more than this individual who is subject to birth and death? That is the question. He wants to know the true nature of I. Okay. So now, through this question, he asks Lord Yama, you teach me that knowledge which will enable me to understand the true nature of I. Okay. Now, Lord Yama has to answer. What is his answer? It's a very interesting answer. What does he try to do? Lord Yama tries to dissuade him from asking that question. He says, you are too young. This inquiry is something which is too big. Right? So he explains in the next verse, his response is, he tries to say, now this is all, just forget about this inquiry. So here he says, Devaihi atra api vichikitsam tam pura nahi sugneyam anuhu eshaha dharmaha anyam vara nachiketaha vrunishva mama uparotsi sirati ma srujainam. Okay, he says that this question that you have asked about the nature of Atma is something which is not suvigneyam. It's not easy to understand. Right? So here he says, why is it not easy to understand? He says it is anuhu eshaha dharmaha. It is very subtle inquiry. Okay? And that subtle inquiry, in order to do this subtle inquiry, you need to be prepared. You are just 11-year-old boy. How are you going to reflect upon the realities at that level? What is the nature of I? Am I a mortal or not? These are two big questions which cannot be handled by a child of 10 or 11 years old. And he says that, not only you, he says, even devaha api vichikitsam, even all the exalted beings on this earth, on the earth and somewhere else, they all also don't know the true nature of I. Okay, there is one thing that so many people don't have any idea about. Very exalted people don't know about what is the true nature of I. Then what to talk of you who's so young, so, not yet, you've not gone through enough experiences of life, and you, physically very young, so you are not ready for this inquiry. So he says, this question you give up and you ask for some other question. Ask me something else. Okay, and now what could he be asking for himself if he did not ask this question? What are the possibilities? Exactly. As Vandana says, you need not what is the nature of true nature of I. What an abstract question. Right? You can ask for something much more concrete, like what Vandana is saying. What? Wealth, power, easy. Ask for easy things, and if Nachiketa has no idea, Lord Yama wants to give him ideas of what he can ask for himself. So he starts giving all these different options. Okay, what could be, not this question, but what could be his third boon? So he starts giving options, and he says all these different list of options that he could ask for, but not that question. Right? So he gives different options. What are the options he gives? Shatayushaha pautran vrunishva. You can ask for, putra is son or daughters, and pautran means grandchildren. And not just children and grandchildren, but what if you have children and grandchildren, but if they are not blessed with long life, then what? It actually can create a lot of sorrow in you, right? So he says you can ask for Shatayushaha. Shatayushaha means 100-year-old. So that your kids will be 100 years old, and their kids also will be 100 years old. That you can ask. Then he says Bahun Pashun. Lots of what? Cattle. You can ask. Cattle in Vedic times stood for what? Wealth. So you can ask for all these. Bahun means plenty, not just one or two. Plenty of what? Cattles. Hastihi hiranyam ashwan. The wealth can be what? Pashu. What kind of pashu? Hasti. Hasti means elephant. Elephants are not like, they are majestic, right? It's not easy to own an elephant. And so you can ask for elephants, you can ask for ashwan, the horses. You can ask for hiranyam. Hiranyam is gold. Right? Bhumehe mahat ayatanam vrunishva. You can ask to be, now this is all the wealth. What is the other thing? That you can rule over the earth. The state. Or earth, entire earth. You can ask for that. Okay? Swayam cha jivaha sharadaha yavat ichchasi. Now imagine they all live for long, but obviously in order to enjoy this, what? Elephants, horses, the kingdom. But if you are given only 1 year to do that, it's too short. So he says, even you will have a long life, so you can enjoy all this for long time. That also I will ensure. Right? So here he says, you can also have a very long life. Etat tulyam yadi manyase varam vrunishva vittam chira jivikamcha. Okay? Now these are all the different options that I have given, but you can use your creativity and you can think of anything. These are just some ideas and suggestions. But along this line, anything that you want. A child can say what? Oh, I want chocolates. Now is it figuring here? I want car, I want Porsche, I want Ferrari. It's not figuring here. So that means you have free imagination and you can you ask for whatever you want. Okay, so here he says, if you find something which is similar to this or more than this, you can ask with reference to Vittam in the general category of wealth, different forms of wealth and power, and Chira Jivika, long life. You can ask. Okay, he says, Mahabhumau Nachiketaha Tvam Edhi Kamanam Tva Kama Bhajam Karomi. Okay, I'll give you anything that you want. He's creating a picture for Nachiketa, that you are in midst of all the pleasures of life, anything that you can think of. Just ask for it and you're given. Okay, I will make you the one who can enjoy the kamas. Kamas are the pleasures of just extraordinary type. Okay, ye kama durlabha martyaha loke. Okay, so that means you only can choose from what? Things that you know. And what are the forms of pleasures that you know? Forms of pleasures which are available on earth. You don't know. You can only choose from what you know. You can't choose from things that you don't know. So here he says, within Martyaloka, Martyaloka is on this earth, you are given some pleasures and you ask for one of them. But I'll give you some pleasures which are not available on this earth. Okay? So he starts giving examples, right, of what are they. Okay? Ma ramaha sarataha saturyaha na hridisha labhyaha aniya manushyehi. I can give you all these different women that are not available on this earth, extremely beautiful, right? I can give you all these different vehicles which are not available on this earth. Okay, and I can give you things which are not at all possible in this Martyaloka. And all that I will give you. Okay. Abhir mat prattabihi paricharayasva nachiketaha maranam ma nuprakshihi. Okay. You can ask for anything, but please take back your question about what is the true nature of I. Okay. Now imagine, now here supposedly inquiry about true nature of I is going on. No, Lord Yama is coming you and asking you, you can choose this, you can choose this. But the life and its circumstances will present what? Many choices. You can choose, you have limited time. And you have to choose what you are going to do with that time. And so many different options come up. Okay, how are you going to make the choice? How are you going to make the choice? What?
According to what you value.
Exactly, according to what you value. So if what it may seem abstract, what is this understanding true nature of I? Seems like such a vague thing. But going for a movie, going for coffee, so much more concrete. Right? So now, what are you going to choose? A friend calls and says, let's go for a movie, and if, now then you also know there is a Vedanta class, and you have to make a choice. Like this Nachiketa, he was given all these options and he had to make a choice. Everybody, without meeting Lord Yama, has n number of choices. You can choose, you have so many options of what you can do with your time and with your life. Infinite options. In which direction? It may seem infinite choice, but basically in what? Two directions. Artha and Kama. Artha means the pursuit of security. Pursuit of security means here, what did he say which represented security?
Just about everything, his family, his estates, his
Exactly.
horses,
His horses, cattle,
gold,
gold, exactly. It all falls within Artha, pursuit of Artha. Okay? Your relationships, people that you love, these are all forms of security. Right? So that means most of people's lives are preoccupied with what? Artha. And the second is what we call Kama. We don't just, it's not just the thing for security, there is a second very huge commitment, and that is what? Commitment for Kama. Enjoyment. Okay? That enjoyment is, what is the source of that enjoyment? Infinite. Oh, my enjoyment comes from sports. Now within sports, how many different things are available? How many? You can have what? Tennis, you can love squash, you can like kabaddi, you can like cricket, you can like anything. Right? And within cricket, how far your like for cricket can go? How far? So that means infinite options, and within an option, infinite possibilities. And time that you are given is what?
50 years.
80, 90 years. And what are the possibilities? Endless. So what is the nature of mind?
Try everything. Grab it.
Yeah, try this, try that, do this. Now maybe this is fun. Right? And this is what? This Kama pursuit is an incredible pursuit. Because don't think it's a simple, just, a pleasure pursuit. You have multi-million industry there. Your pursuit of pleasure. Every time you travel in a plane, you have this beautiful magazine. Okay? And every time they come up with amazing destinations and amazing photos. So if you have no ideas about where to go, always it will give you some ideas of where you can go. And it's endless. Okay? There's all these enticing you. Oh, and now then you meet friends, and then they tell you, oh, this time I went to, some location in south of France, sounds very beautiful, Saint-Paul-de-Vence. Sounds, oh wow, where, nobody knows where it is, but oh wow, you went there. So now next, you don't even know where it is now. After the friend leaves, you start looking, where is Saint-Paul-de-Vence? And then next time you want to go there. Okay? So that means endless. Then things that we didn't even have desire for because they were not even there. What is the thing? iPhone. 10 years ago, there was no iPhone to desire. Okay? Now, not only iPhone has come, but now what? You want to have iPhone 6 because there are posters everywhere, all these photos taken by iPhone 6. So if you're not happy even with iPhone 5. Endless. Endless locations, endless objects, endless sports. Spa industry didn't exist few years ago. Now everywhere there is a spa. Now there is a spa. Now what? Massages and all have become too common. Everywhere they have yoga. Yoga is a non-event because everybody has it. Massages, Swedish massage and Thai massage and all, too common. Ayurveda is too common. So spas are also looking for new activities to entice, to distinguish them from somebody else. So now in Thailand, exactly, the biggest thing was they have these bowls where they have all these tiny fishes, and then you put your food there and they just eat all your dead skin. I mean, really, so you always, and then yoga has what? Hot yoga, then power yoga. You have to keep on expanding and expanding. This is whole industry there. There are all these creative people. Creative people are paid fortune to do what? Come up with ideas which are which attract your attention. Attract your attention, and not only just attract your attention, but what? Create a desire in you.
The new buzzword is that you create a desire before you even know you have a desire for something. You anticipate the need and you create that, so that after you create the thing, people will want it. Till then they don't even know that they want it.
They want it. Exactly. Absolutely. Right? So Artha and Kama, and this is exactly what Lord Yama is telling Nachiketa. That I have all these options. Now you can also think of different options and you can have everything. And our own life also is what? All these different options without Lord Yama. You come here on this earth and you have all these things. And whole life goes in what? Pursuit of those things. Okay? And therefore, and maybe somewhere deep, there are some occasions in your life where they shake you a little bit, and then you think about bigger questions in life. What are the bigger questions in life? What is the nature of I? What happens to a human being after, the human being goes away? Then what happens? other things come up and your mind is again distracted, and again you continue to live the same way. So they pop up sometimes, but then do you really pursue them? Not most of them don't, right? Because they get enticed by this infinite options. What happened to Nachiketa? Did he get enticed by that? No. You don't even need to read what is coming next to know that he did not get enticed by that. Okay? So, there he tells Lord Yama he's not interested in any of these options. Okay? But sometimes he is not interested and he can just say, yeah, no, it's like a child. He wants little marbles and you convince him that no, these marbles are your friends, you return these marbles, I'll give you this, I'll give you that. And the child says, no, but I want only this marble and I don't want anything else. Right? So what is that? Is that some huge analysis? No. It's just that, you're obsessed with something and you can't see anything beyond that. And Nachiketa could have been like that. No, I only want answer to this question and I don't care for this. Like a child who just wants marbles and nothing else. But he was not like that. He gives exactly the reason why he doesn't want it. There is an analysis there. He doesn't just reject it and say, yeah, this I don't want. He says why he does not want it. Okay? So what he says is, his response is very interesting. He says, Shvabhava martasya yat atyankata sarvendriyanam jarayanti tejaha. The nature of objects is, yes, I can be surrounded by many different objects, okay, but as I consume the objects, what happens to me? You get satiated. Right? The first dress excites you so much. Then what happens? The second dress, also very exciting. The first party that you have to go to, you are waiting for people to invite you to parties. And you feel so excited that, you're invited here, you drop names to people, yesterday I went to this party and that day I went to this party. So then you're recognized in the society as somebody who is, of a status and all that. Okay? Then you go for 200 parties. Then what happens? I hate parties. No, I really like to be at home. Where have you gone? You travel this whole big circle and then what? The parties are there, but they have lost what? Their charm for you. They've almost consumed you. Right? So he says, actually it is very interesting. He says the world is set up in a way that while you're enjoying different things, what your senses are used for it and they are wearing out. This is what he says, Jarayanti Tejaha. Jarayanti Tejaha means the sense organs are designed in a way that you think your capacity of your sense organs is exactly the same. You are born with a given set of eyes. Over a period of time, when you use your eye, you're 42 years old. What happens? You have to wear glasses. So that means by using your eyes, there is a natural decay. So here he says, even if the objects remain, the capacity of my sense organs to enjoy those objects deteriorates over a period of time. I remember when we were young, right? There is some good food made at home, and we would just like eat and eat and eat and eat, right? And there was a competition about who can eat the most. And by the time you become 25, what happens? Then you get into this phase where you don't, all this food is in front of you and you don't want to eat anything. Why? Because you're so conscious about your figure and you want to look good and you want to have size 0 and all kinds of things happen. Okay. That is the first time. It was interesting, that we were taught to enjoy food. We loved food and we enjoyed food, right? The first time when I went to the US and I was like, how people count calories when they eat, and it's like, yeah, I have to do a workout because I've eaten this much. That idea was so alien to me that when you're eating, you're not just enjoying and saying, wow, this is beautiful flavor. You're thinking about, oh, how many hours in the gym I have to spend to burn this calorie. I had never heard of something like that. So therefore, but the truth is, by the time you're 60 or 70 years old, even if you have healthy relationship with food and not obsessed by all of that, what will happen? Your capacity will decrease. Even if you keep very healthy relationship with food, the body is designed in a way that your capacity deteriorates over a period of time. So the external world remains, the objects remain, but your enjoyment decreases. So he sees this very clearly. So he says, even if you give me 100 years to live, you can't reprogram the body. Right? So this is something which is temporary. I don't want that. Right? Then he says, api sarvam jivitam alpam eva taveva vahaha tava nrityaha gitehe. Okay, here he says, okay, you're offering me 100 years of living. It seems like very long, right? But if I look at, this is the perspective, if I see in countless flow of time, what is 100 years? Insignificant. As insignificant as 50 years. Or 70 years. From my standpoint, it may look like a very long life. But if I really look at from the flow of time, it's still, he says, all this long life that you're offering me is still what? Very, very small. Very short. So here he says that it is alpameva. Jivitam alpameva. It's small only. Okay, so don't entice me with all of that. He says, Taveva vahaha tava nritya gitehe. Lord Yama also offered all kinds of music and dance and with all these different celestial beings and all. He says, you keep all of that. I am not interested in that. Okay, he says, why is he not interested in that? He says, na vittena tarpaniyaha manushyaha. I have observed that any human being, just because of wealth, is that person, can I make that inference that everybody who is wealthy is happy? No. I also cannot make an inference that wealth will not make me happy. That is also a wrong inference. You can be very wealthy and you can be happy. Right? But because you are wealthy, it doesn't automatically mean that you are happy. So he says, just by mere wealth, manushyaha na tarpaniyaha. Never I have seen somebody who can say, because I have all this wealth, I am totally fulfilled. Neither in the present, nor in the past, nor in the future. Okay? So this mad chase for that, with nothing else in life, no other goal in life, he says it's futile. Because what am I going for? Why is wealth important for me? Is wealth important for its own sake? I'm interested in my own fulfillment. Okay? What is of real importance to me is my fulfillment. And I think that accumulating more and more wealth will lead to more and more fulfillment. That is my conclusion. But is it true? Not true. And he understood. This 11-year-old boy said that what I'm really interested in is in my fulfillment, and I have never seen anybody being totally fulfilled with all the things that you're promising me. So why should I go for those things? Right? Because what I'm interested is my fulfillment. Okay? So, but one thing you have to understand if you understand Vedanta clearly, and that is the next line that he says. This is what shows how brilliant he is. Okay? He says that Jivishyamaha yavat ishyasi tvam varahatu me varaniyaha sa evaha. He says, anyway, that I have seen you, I will anyway have a long life. I will anyway have wealth. But I don't want to waste my third boon on that. What does it mean? What is he saying? What he's saying is something very significant. Okay? This particular analysis that I have just given you, it may make you conclude what? Security is not important, pleasure is not important, therefore it's all material. I have to reject it all and I have to go for what? Self-inquiry. Nachiketa is not like that. He says, all this you will give me anyway. Is he rejecting it? No. He's very smart. We have what we call bipolar thinking. Bipolar thinking means either my whole life is what? Committed to security and pleasure, or what happens? I say this is all totally unimportant, I want to go for something else. And I want to reject it all because this is all material, this will not give me happiness. So either you just go for it or you totally reject it. What is Nachiketa saying? He says, I'll have it. I'll have it. But this is not going to be the end of what I'm looking for in my life. You will give it to me anyway. What does it mean? He does not devalue long life. He does not devalue what? Wealth. He does not devalue the pleasure, but he doesn't want to make that the only end in his life. This is a real spiritual person. Okay? Security does not give me fulfillment, does not mean that's a reality. And that's what Upanishads point out. But then we understand it wrongly. We say security, different forms of security like money or whatever, wealth, in any form does not give me the fulfillment that I am searching for, fact. Therefore, it is unimportant. Therefore, it is unimportant is my own addition. This is not what the teaching says. The teaching says it has its own value. You can't just reject money or wealth as something which is unimportant. It has its own place. What is the role? What money is just nothing but a resource. Any resource is very useful. Okay, money can give you a comfortable living, and that is nothing wrong with that. Money can give you access to education, very important. Money can give you access to what? Your children's education, very important. If you have too much money, you can also share with other people. There is nothing wrong with it. There is nothing wrong with having money or any resource for that matter. But if your whole life is committed to only that, you've wasted all the other potential. That's what it is saying. It is not saying that it is unimportant. It says it cannot give you the final fulfillment that you are searching for. Therefore, put your pursuit of security in its own place. It's not totally neglect it. Put it in its right place. Put your life in perspective. Different forms of pleasure, because they don't give you fulfillment, doesn't mean that you have to reject all of them. You can have, there is no problem with that. If you are not giving it, what happens is we do Shobhanadhyasa. An object objectively has a given value. Either we give more value than it has, or we give less value than what it has. We always miss the reality. Vedanta is a very sophisticated thing. It doesn't tell you to just reject things. It just says give everything its right place, neither more nor less. That's why it may seem to others that Nachiketa was just rejecting everything. He was not rejecting it. He says, I want to have it anyway, but I don't want to waste what? My third boon on it. Very different. Okay, so that he very cleverly says, you will give me anyway. You will give me anyway means I'll have it. Okay, so this is something which is very important, that you must understand that in the traditional vision of the Veda, we don't make this distinction between material and spiritual. We don't make that distinction. There is life and there is a possibility. And you can choose to do what? Small things will occupy your mind totally, and you miss out on what? Big things of life. That is a possibility. Or you only think about big things and you totally forget other things. That is also another choice. Or there is a third choice, which is an intelligent choice. What is the intelligent choice? Exactly. You look at the bigger picture, and within that big picture, what? Put everything else in its place, so that you don't miss the big picture, and also what? You don't neglect your what we call day-to-day living. So that means you have to have a proper perspective. It's all about changing your perspective and having a right perspective, neither more nor less. Okay, and Nachiketa was like that. So here he says, I want to have everything, but I don't want to waste my third boon on it. Okay, Yasmin idam vichikitsanti mrutyaha yat samparaye mahati bruhi natat yaha ayam varaha gudham anupravishtaha na anyam tasmat nachiketaha vrunite. Here he says, now your next argument is even devas are what? Confused about this nature of reality. So it seems like very complex. So he says, just because it is subtle and I have to use my brain in little bit more rigorously, it does not discourage me from inquiring into it. He says that if it is so difficult that even devas don't know the reality of the nature of Atma, I want to know it even more. So that means, what does it show? What does it show?
He's already come to some understanding of that balance that you mentioned you wanted to serve.
Yeah. He's come to an understanding of the balance, but he has confidence in himself and in his ability to understand. He's not deterred by the fact that some big people have not understood it. So that doesn't discourage him. He says, if it is difficult, then I want to know it even more. It's even more challenging, then I want to know it. That means he has a good self-esteem. How does he see himself? As somebody who's capable of doing an intricate inquiry and understanding. This is one thing which is absolutely essential for a student of Vedanta. There are so many people who come to Vedanta thinking, oh, there is some spirituality class, but the minute the inquiry gets a little bit intricate, they said, oh wow, this is all too difficult for me, I can't understand that. And they all drop out. They don't give it enough chance to see, because initially it seems like a little bit, it takes you out of your normal comfort zone. You are used to thinking about what? Your children, your father, your mother, your business. That's all. The human mind is preoccupied with that. If anybody makes you think about certain things differently or from a different perspective, what happens? You feel, this is all too much. Or it's not relevant. You think that this little life is relevant, and that one becomes too abstract and irrelevant to this concerns of life that you have. Okay, so that means there is this whole disposition of that person who is not afraid of inquiry. You're not shy of inquiring and challenging the ways of your mind and ways of your understanding things. Okay. That is a very important, and having certain amount of healthy self-esteem, very important. If you think you're useless, if you think that you're a failure, and if you think that you're a victim and you are being persecuted by the world and all that, with that mind you can't understand this vision. It's too subtle, it's too sophisticated. And your mind is preoccupied with some very, very basic things.
Then, Neema, don't we all come to this knowledge?
Yes.
With minds
Certain.
Preoccupied with?
Yes. That's true. We all come to this knowledge with minds because we don't know any better. We don't know what else is there. Right? So in another class of mine, I asked them, I said, according to the Upanishads, there are 4 pursuits. One is artha, which is your security, kama, which is your pleasure. The third is dharma. Dharma is what? Righteousness. And the fourth is moksha. Moksha means that fulfillment, that answering this question, what is my true nature, which is an answer to my real fulfillment. Okay, I said, how much of your time is occupied, if you take in terms of your time, how much of time you spend in pursuit of artha, how much of your time you spend in a pursuit of kama, how much of your time you spend in pursuit of dharma and moksha. What was the answer, do you think, of everyone? Exactly. Moksha though doesn't figure anywhere. It doesn't figure anywhere. Nobody thinks about, what will give me fulfillment, let me know the true nature of myself. Hey, that doesn't come at all into the picture. What is surprising is, even dharma, does it really come into the picture? Doesn't really.
We take it for granted that, okay, I'm an ethical person, so it's there.
Exactly.
I think that would
Exactly.
that's how I would think. That, in all my transactions,
Exactly.
I'm an ethical person, but that's enough for me.
Exactly. Dharma comes, as Nehru says, in a limited manner. Sometimes for some people it doesn't come at all, but for some people who think are a little bit more responsible, it comes, but it comes in slightly limited, in a way which is in a narrowly defined way. As long as I'm not cheating anybody, as long as I'm not lying to anybody, then I'm following dharma.
It's a passive way of.
But all the nuances of dharma, who is reflecting on one's own behaviors and the impact it has on different people around? Am I hurting people? Are my attitudes right? Are there any distortions in the way I think, or the way I look at things and the way I interact with things? How many?
The foundation should be dharma.
Exactly. Even exactly. This is what the Vedas are saying. The foundation has to be dharma. Then you can go for your artha and kama. There is no problem. We are not saying don't go for artha and kama, but the foundation has to be dharma. And the dharma not in a narrow sense, but in its totality. But actually our life is lived in a way that it is totally preoccupied with artha and kama. I didn't say that. I asked people, why should I assume that all our lives are preoccupied with only artha and kama? It is people who tell me that. Who am I to put down people? I don't underestimate, or I just ask. They are the ones who tell me. They told me that in fact we don't even really think about dharma in a deep manner. Okay, so this is where this is now a mind which is preoccupied with artha and kama. Now, the problem what is wrong in the pursuit of artha kama? Really, there is nothing wrong. Please don't think that it is wrong. Don't think it is wrong. One thing, as I said, is through that, if you're looking for your fulfillment, it will never come. But it has its other values. Recognize that. Okay. Now, then you have given a limited place to your artha and kama, and they are useful and they are doing it. And they are doing some job for you. But when you pursue, is there a guarantee that you'll get everything that you want? No. Then comes another complication. Because you pursue them thinking that it will give you the fulfillment which it is not capable of giving. But not only that, you don't always get what you want. Then what happens? When you don't get what you want, what happens?
You might fixate on that.
And when you fixate on that, what happens? Frustrations. So that means not only it may not ever give you what you're looking for, but it will give other things which are what?
Opposite of fulfillment.
Opposite of fulfillment. That is a problem. Right? Because if I engage in the world with thinking that this is going to give me this, and if I don't get that to which I attribute my happiness, I cannot handle the loss of not having it. So this is where I ask people another question. I ask them, so Okay, 100% of your time is spent on artha and kama. Right? Now, how much of everything that you have pursued in the domain of artha and kama you actually get? How many things happen your way and how many things don't happen your way? Okay, this is probably the best answer I got, half and half. I think among the most successful people, I got this answer 50%. This is approximately the highest I got. And then the answers I got from other people was appalling. Starting from 0 to 5% to 10% to 20%, the highest was 50%. So now there is another problem, because 50% of the time, even if you are the most successful, things did not happen your way. When things did not happen your way, you invariably tell yourself something. It's not possible to live without telling yourself something. What do you tell when things don't happen your way?
Dwell on what you didn't get, so I'm a loser, I'm a failure, then that.
Exactly. Right?
Because you don't dwell on what you got.
Exactly.
You dwell on what I did not.
Exactly.
So I put
As
my
if
100% in it, but I got 50%. So that 50% is here. So what about that other 50%?
Exactly. So you dwell, as Neeru very rightly says, we don't dwell on our things that we got. Where is the habit of mind dwelling on what we did not get? And when I keep on dwelling on what I did not get, what comes? Frustration, pain, anger, persecution. Right? So now, if I am suffering from this sense of, or then sometimes I said, oh, things are unfair, because I feel like I'm a victim. Okay? When my mind is totally preoccupied with this, if this is my image of myself and the world, which is what the world is unfair, I am a victim, I am a failure. If this is how my mental makeup is, where is the question of moksha? I'm not available. How am I available to even undertake this inquiry? That inquiry into the nature of I seems so far away and so abstract. Okay, so this is why, as Sangeeta says, dharma becomes a very important foundation. The whole pursuit of moksha is based on what? There is one foundation, which is dharma. You have, dharma includes right attitudes, right values, right interaction with the world. It is, as Neeru says, we give a very narrow definition to dharma. I haven't cheated anybody, I have not done anything, so therefore I am dharmic. The dharma definition is much, much bigger. What are the implicit assumptions I have about myself? What are the implicit assumptions I have about the world, about people? This is all part of dharma. And I need to embellish myself, I need to nurture myself. Only when I have a healthy self-esteem, then what? This bigger and higher inquiry will work for me. And Nachiketa considers himself as ready for this inquiry. He has a good self-esteem. He says, if all those people that you think are exalted, they find it difficult, don't think I'll be intimidated by that. I want to know it even more. He has confidence in himself. This is a nature, this is a profile of a person who comes to this inquiry of the nature of I. Moksha. Okay. Every character in every Upanishad and Bhagavad Gita, they are all brilliant people. Nobody is a loser. Nobody is a disenchanted person who has lost hope in life. There is not one character like that. Each character is brilliant, whether you look at Chandogya Upanishad or you look at Mundaka Upanishad or you can look at Kena Upanishad. They are all brilliant people asking brilliant questions. Kathopanishad, Arjuna, the character of Arjuna. Right? It shows that to come to this inquiry, you need to what? Have invested in what? Cultivating yourself. Otherwise, naturally, it will not attract you. It's not that you are eliminated by any force or any person or anything. Just your mind, it doesn't reach that inquiry. It doesn't resonate with you. Even for this inquiry to resonate, you need to be an evolved person. Okay, so Nachiketa's character is an insight into who is all of you are like Nachiketa. You have gathered here to know the nature of I. And you have n number of options to do during this 1 hour. And you are not enticed by those options and you make that choice of coming here. And you feel that yes, this teaching, through this teaching, you have confidence in yourself that through this teaching you will understand something more about life, which is key to your fulfillment. Okay, so this is a story. Yes.
So these Upanishads and the stories contained in them, are they essentially for the purpose of symbolism? Because there are a lot of questions which are unanswered, like where exactly does Lord Rama live?
Exactly. These are symbolisms, right? It shows that this question that human being has, right, is unanswered. And then who will answer that question? The Lord, somebody who has crossed death. Right?
Is there anywhere information available as part of mythological lore? What was Nachiketa's background, say the previous birth? Because I mean, everything is obviously a precocious child.
Yeah. So obviously the idea is not about the details of the past and what all he did, because according to, if you go by that model, he has had infinite births, and the idea is not to get involved with that what makes him who he is today, but the idea is he has come to this point in his life where he wants to know the most essential question which otherwise people don't ask. That is the point. Okay, and he's not deterred by all these, he's not intimidated by, this question is something which is many people don't know the answer to. He's also not kind of enticed by all these different options that are given to him, but he's not rejecting them either, right? This is the character of through this you see who is interested in this inquiry.
And who's ready for it?
And who's ready for it.
Because in the Gita we did that.
Exactly.
Krishna says the qualities
Exactly.
of the
Wise person. Yes.
who's ready for this
Yes,
knowledge.
exactly. It shows you that is the purpose of this, right? And now on, from next verse, Lord Yama starts to teach. So he went. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hare